So the first DLC for Nioh 2 has come out, and I figured I would give my thoughts on the 3 new bosses introduced with it, at least in the main missions. I haven't done the side missions yet, and I don't really care anyway. So let's begin with what I thought was the worst boss in this DLC. Uminyudo. Yeah, I'm not gonna mention the name of this boss again in this review. So as you can see, this boss is a reskin of Umibosu from Nioh 1. I don't know why they decided to redo that boss out of all the bosses, but alright. I guess the look of the boss was cool, and that definitely still applies. Instead of 2 eerie glowing eyes, this one has this weird statue-like head inside it. Unfortunately, this boss doesn't just look like Umibosu, but it also fights like it. It shoots wreckages or anchors or whatever they are at you, it has a laser beam, it can use its tentacle-like arms to try to crush you. It's all very familiar. And because of that, I found the beginning of this fight to be very easy and a bit dull. But things change in phase 2, where like Umibosu, it jumps out of the sea into the platform you are on. However, it doesn't come alone. It has these 2 little shit crabs with him. Dealing with them and the boss is really messy and annoying. But, like with Umibosu, once again, you can just delete that entire mechanic if you did something specific outside of the boss arena. Around the midpoint of this mission you get an ally called Benkei, and he helps you fight through some enemies, but then he decides to ditch you. If you talk to him, he will offer to help you in the upcoming boss fight. What you have to do is hit this gong in the boss arena with a strong attack, and Benkei will rain arrows around you, killing the crabs. However, when I talked to Benkei, all he said was ... and some guy hit me and cancelled the riveting conversation, and I thought that was all he was gonna say, so I moved on. But then I fought the boss and I figured there's no way the game is gonna force me to fight the boss and some crabs at the same time, so I went back to talk to him and this time it worked. So I personally had a really annoying time trying to figure this shit out, but I don't think that's the game's fault. It was just unlucky. But without the crabs, the boss is actually pretty easy, but it's also kinda fun. I like how erratic and yet kind of graceful its moves are, and despite being a reskin of Umibosu, it does have mostly its own animations, and I really like the way it looks in phase 2. Still, half of the fight is just Umibosu, and the other half, while cool, is nothing that amazing, so I don't think this boss is that great. It's alright, decent. I would probably place it somewhere in the bottom half of the Nioh 2 bosses in terms of quality, but near the middle. Next is Mysterious Warrior Monk, also known as Benkei. Before you get the help of Benkei, you have to fight him, and he's really tough. One of the hardest bosses in Nioh 2, I think. He has some crazy long combos that I have difficulty reading, he covers so much ground with each of his hits, he has massive range and a grab move that really doesn't care about your feelings. Or hitboxes. Sometimes if you dodge to the side of the grab, it will still get you, so I found that a little bit questionable. But I think he's a cool boss. He's pretty different from the other Nioh 2 bosses, he has a fair amount of health and damage, and he's just decently fun to fight. I don't really have much else to say about him. Nothing really stood out as an awful mechanic, and nothing really stood out as an amazing mechanic. So I would say he's like slightly above the average Nioh 2 boss, maybe. I think in general Nioh 2 has really good bosses, so he's probably mid-tier. And finally we have Minamoto no Yoshitsune, or something like that. This is definitely the hardest boss in not just the DLC, but the entire game as well. Not as hard as some of the ridiculous DLC fights in Nioh 1, but I'm actually kind of happy for that. Because unlike some of the Nioh 1 DLC bosses, I felt like this guy was really well designed and completely fair. He's fast as fuck, but he has pauses in between his combos, allowing you to strike back. And to make up for his insane speed, his damage is kind of low. And even though he is fast, his attacks are all fairly telegraphed in my opinion. And he has a huge amount of different attacks. They definitely didn't get lazy with this last boss. He has a really cool phase 2 as well. He starts flying around and he can go full on Owl Father on you and throw his bird at you. But he mostly reminds me of Asa Nagamasa from the base game. He's like a bird yokai who can fly and throw projectiles at you. I like it Asai too, but this is just a bigger dick version of that fight. So I think this boss is great. One of the best in Nioh 2, one of the best out of both of the games. I think he's my second favorite boss, right behind Otakemaru. So that's all the 3 bosses. The other 2 were a bit more mediocre, but the last boss definitely made up for it. One thing I really enjoy about the Nioh bosses is that at first you look at their health and damage and you're like, this is impossible, it's like a 6-minute fight. But when you actually learn it, it ends up being like 3 minutes long. Which, by the way, is in my opinion the perfect length for a boss fight. That's the sweet spot for me, 3 minutes. And all of the DLC bosses I ended up beating in just about 3 minutes. So that's good. As for my overall thoughts on the DLC, I think it's a big improvement on the previous DLC. I didn't enjoy the DLC in the first game. Might have something to do with the fact that I was like 50 levels below their recommended level. This time I was actually over-leveled, if anything. Doesn't necessarily mean much, as what's most important is your equipment and build. And I don't really know if mine is all that good. It did the job well enough though, so I guess it's fine. I didn't really think that highly of the levels themselves in this DLC. They were pretty average. Not bad, just not very interesting. And there's also a new weapon, the split staff. And for a while I didn't even realize I had like 5 of them in my inventory. For some reason I mistook them for Kusarigamas and I just sold them away and assumed you would get the split staff as a reward for completing the DLC or something. I also had no idea the DLC had come out. I was just looking through some of my old achievements on my PS4 and I noticed that there's a new thing added to Nioh 2. And then I realized it was DLC and my jaw dropped. I hadn't heard anything about it. But anyway, the weapon seems cool. I haven't used it a lot yet. I might just stick with the hatchets and the switchglaive for now. But overall, I had a good time with the DLC. I wasn't disappointed and I'm looking forward to more in the future. Thanks for watching and see ya. I don't know when. I haven't been uploading like anything for a while. It just depends on what there's to do, what ideas I have. So